Tina, did you make it?
I'm on.
Yeah. Yeah, so we're all here.
We're all here. Fantastic. All righty. Let's call this meeting to order. Would you call the roll, please, Mrs. Burns?
Yes, Mr. Parentano,
Present.
Mr. Allen. Mr. Allen,
Present.
Mrs. Bowman,
Here.
Miss Boyle,
Here.
Mrs. Hallenbeck,
Here.
Mr. Kovitz, you said is joining later.
He'll join us later, yes.
Mr. Marrington,
Here.
Mr. Cirillo,
Here.
and Mr. Sullivan.
Present.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. Can we all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, please? Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the
United States of America,
and to
and to the republic
for which
for which it
Stands.
stands,
one
one nation,
under
under God, indivisible,
and
with
liberty.
liberty
And justice
for
for
all.
all.
Thank you all. We'll have to start with a special action item 2.01. Continuation of the suspension aspects of policy number 006.1. Whereas the novel coronavirus, COVID-19, continues to create an environment where the Board of School Directors is unable to hold its meetings in a physical location. Now therefore be it resolved in accordance with the board policy 003 that the Neshaminy School Board of Directors hereby approves a continuation of the temporary suspension of policy 006, attendance at meetings via electronic communication, originally approved on March 24th, 2020, until the next meeting of the board. The motion's been made. May we have a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Sullivan. All in favor? Oh, I'm sorry, roll call vote, Mrs. Burns?
Mrs. Bowman, Mr. Allen, I'm sorry.
Yes.
Mrs. Bowman,
Yes.
Miss Boyle,
Yes.
Mrs. Hallenbeck,
Yes.
Mr. Marrington,
Yes.
Mr. Cirillo,
Yes.
Mr. Sullivan,
Yes.
and Mr. Parentano.
Yes.
8-0.
Thank you. I'll move us on to our executive session statement. The board met in executive session this evening prior to this meeting to discuss matters of employment, issues related to labor relations, matters related to litigation, and matters related to school safety and security. Our district mission statement: Neshaminy community builds futures by empowering each child to become a productive citizen and a lifelong learner. Do we have any announcement, Mrs. Burns?
No announcements.
Mr. Jones, Superintendent's Report, please.
Good evening, everyone. I have a roster of meetings that are coming up for July and August. Good luck with all of them. As you all know, this is my last meeting with you. It was very nice, Chris Stanley. I didn't see much of it, but the slideshow was much appreciated there. I want to talk a little bit at the end of this report about some of the occurrences over the past 4 years that I feel real proud about. But for July and August, right now, we're still listing our meetings. Actually, they're in a to be determined status. So pay attention, and we may be virtual still in July. It's possible we could move back into the buildings. Walter Miller, a nice little spotlight there. It was in our Facebook, on our Facebook page as well. A couple of our cafeteria workers took it upon themselves to create a nice, colorful rock garden that students have contributed to as well. Some flowers with some positive messages. It's been a nice addition to the front of the building. As we've talked about, it seems like many of the major functions of the school continue to happen even in this virtual world. A choir performance, a wonderful choir performance by the elementary school. Congratulations to Ms. Patrick for what she was able to do with the fourth graders there. Similarly, our orchestra students in the middle school and the high school put together a very nice orchestra compilation of Over the Rainbow. I don't know how our teachers have gotten so good being able to put together the videos for these types of big events, but each was special for sure. Our PE teachers at Sandburg got out. Mr. Durant, as we talked about at our last meeting, was a special fixture there at the school, a close relationship with our PE teachers, and they awarded 2 students the Al Durant Service Award. Social distance involved, masks, but a real nice opportunity to continue to recognize Mr. Durant this year, as has been done in the past and will continue to be done. We had move-up days at our middle schools, nice programs there, all on June 11th, all 3 middle schools, virtual video productions. I compliment each of them for their hard work to make sure that that happened, and it was appreciated by families. Virtual field trips even were occurring as the school year came to an end. And of course, our senior class has activities planned for the 27th of this month as we turn to green, and targeting the first weekend in August for the formal, more traditional graduation in-person ceremony. So that's the extent of what I had prepared. I do want to alert you to the fact that this was in Mr. Stanley's district Facebook, that we had the unfortunate passing of Howard Lindner on June 17th. Mr. Lindner was a teacher, a coach, an administrator here at Neshaminy, and he was one of those, there are a lot of people like this at Neshaminy who give all that they have to the district. He wanted to do right by students in his classroom, and certainly in the athletic teams that he was involved in coaching, especially the track team. He was a large figure on our track in terms of the work that he did with our students there. So our thoughts are with the family and with the passing of Mr. Lindner, and we just want to acknowledge that this evening as well. I did want to tell you at least an opportunity to just reflect a little bit. I didn't arrive at Neshaminy with the thought that 4 years later I'd be bringing my time as an administrator to an end, but it got to a spot in my personal life where it just made more sense for me. I'm not stopping work. I'm actually going to go back to the classroom and teach. I've been a school administrator for over 30 years. I've been a superintendent for 15 years, and there have been a lot of board meetings. So this is my last. I feel like I've accomplished a lot of good over the course of all those years. I'm looking forward to continue to do some good work in the classroom. I'm going to be joining the Philadelphia school system, working in Kensington and a high school, teaching Algebra 1 to all of the ninth graders at the Kensington Health Science Academy. But for the last 4 years, while here, we really did accomplish a good bit. This is a good organization with a lot of strong players doing good work well before my arrival. But I just want to highlight, and I did highlight for the board members in a written report, some of the nice opportunities we were able to capitalize on over the time that I've been here. Our preschool program, we've brought $1 million more into the community. We now have a grant for $1.3 million, and we were a little under 300,000 in a small program. We now have 150 seats for our preschool 3- and 4-year-olds in the Neshaminy community. We focus pretty extensively on social emotional learning and the social emotional aspects that are coupled with our students in the classroom. That was an important part of our strategic plan. We brought there was a nice program for our students who are in the middle, who oftentimes may get overlooked just because we don't have the specialized program. We now have a specialized program tailored for students who really could use just a little extra help. That AVID program has now been part of the high school for 3 years. It's been in 2 of our 3 middle schools. Next year, it'll be in all 3. And it's in a couple of our elementary schools. We would have gone a little further had we not been out for the back end of this year. Strategic planning is really important. We did a lot of good work my first year in developing a strategic plan and trying to focus in on the school's mission and all the different strands of the plan that the community developed. That's part of where that social emotional focus came in. In terms of technology, when I got here, we were in the iPad movement in the middle school. We did kind of turn on the dime a little bit. We went with Chromebooks in the middle school, and actually went with Chromebooks from grades 2 up through 12. And next year we'll have 1-to-1 for all of the grades. But very quickly, most of those students had 1-to-1 technology, and our iPads were able to move to our K and 1 students. So even our youngest learners are in a one-to-one environment in their classroom when technology is appropriate. We also added the Neshaminy Virtual Academy. We now run our own virtual school, an academy. We aren't fitting into that regular routine of the traditional brick and mortar, and actually probably more students are going to continue in that fashion next year, but we're prepared for that. Neshaminy also has a relationship, a unique relationship that we developed with Bucks County Community College for the seniors. Senior year experience with Bucks, we are the only district that buses out. In our case, about 100 students, close to 100 students are taking half of their senior year at Bucks County, and they have 4 college courses on a transcript by the time they finish with success. And those courses translate over, hopefully, in almost all cases into their college experience, but more importantly, it prepares them that much better to make that transition into the college world. And then finally, I do like to focus on, and I think I've helped kind of give others in the organization an eye on what's right. I have a phrase that I picked up from a National Geographic program that talks about celebrating what's right. And we often start our meetings with what's right in the organization. You can always find what's wrong. It's easy to find those things in any organization, in anybody's home. You can find the things that need attention. It's not that we ignore those things, but we also want to make sure that we are giving time and putting a spotlight on good things that are happening. And I didn't say it here, but Chris Stanley's video reminds me, one of the things that kind of coupled with that was our opportunity to get around the district and award a We Build Future pins to, at this point, it must be a couple of hundred people in the organization. And we could continue to award many, many more pins as the years go on, recognizing people who are doing good work, supporting our district mission, and supporting the overall plan. There are many other things. I highlighted a good number of others at the board level, central office, good work to our efficiencies. But overall, those are the points that I take away from the 4 years that I've had the pleasure to work with all of you. And Mr. Paratano, I thank you for having the opportunity to share some of those things this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. It's our pleasure. At this time, we're going to move to the first public comment speaking period. Mr. Stanley will control the mic. Please remember, the speaking time is 3 minutes. State your name, area that you live in, your occupation. Please spell your last name so the board secretary can take proper minutes. And please, no personal attacks. Mr. Stanley, you have the mic.
Thank you. We'll do this the way we usually do. We're going to use the raise hand feature on this. So if you go under participants and find your name, one of the options is raise hand. If you'd like to speak, please do that and I'll call on you in the order that I see them. Do we have any takers? Oh, we do have one. Margaret, why don't you go ahead? You'll be first. You there, Margaret? Might have lost her. Hold on, let me see if I can find her again.
There.
Hello?
Yes, Margaret?
Hi, sorry about that.
You're-
I was having a little bit of trouble with my Zoom.
That's all right, go ahead.
So my name is Margaret Leger. My last name is spelled Leigey. I live in Feasterville, Pennsylvania, and I'm a college professor. And my question is, during this time of dedicated energy to address institutional and systemic racism, has the school board given any reconsideration to changing the mascot at Neshaminy High School?
Ms. Leger, we generally answer questions at the end during board comments. So if you have anything else for this evening, we'll address that at the end of the meeting.
Okay, thank you. This is my first meeting. My daughter's about to start kindergarten at Tawanka, so I'm not quite sure of the order. Thank you.
No problem. Anytime. Thank you so much for participating.
Thank you.
Mr. Stanley?
Tara, you are up next, please.
Hi, this is Tara Huber, last name Huber. I am an English teacher at Neshaminy High School and president of the Neshaminy Federation of Teachers. And I just would like to thank Mr. Jones and wish him luck in the future. We've appreciated a working relationship over the past several years, and just want to extend warm congratulations and best of luck to you from the Neshaminy Federation of Teachers. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Huber.
Do we have any more comments? So going once, going twice. Back to you, Mr. Peritano.
Thank you, Mr. Stanley. At this time, I'm going to shift the agenda just a little bit. And I would like to recognize Dr. McGee at this time for a presentation. Dr. McGee.
Thank you, Mr. Parentano. To follow up on Mr. Jones's words, as you all know, this is his last meeting before he returns to the classroom. So he listed some of his accomplishments, but what he did not list is some of the most meaningful ones, and that's how he's affected people. One of his statements is that the best professional development is your hiring practices. And he's stuck to his word as he's hired in the neighborhood of hundreds of teachers and support staff along the way. In addition, his hiring practice includes a significant number of administrators in the majority of his cabinet. Mr. Palmer at Tawanka, Dr. Orlando at Schweitzer, Mr. Hunt at Bequessing, Mr. French at Maple Point, Ms. Burkholder, Director of Elementary Education, Mr. Irwin, our business manager, Ms. Kozik, our HR director, and he's hired me as Director of Secondary Education. So I'd just like to pause here for a minute for some members of the cabinet to say what Mr. Jones has meant to them and what pieces of him he will take, or they will take with him as they continue on their leadership role here in Neshaminy.
Thank you, Rob. I don't mind if I step in. You don't mind if I step in real quick? I just want to share that Joe has always been very compassionate and empathetic when working with families and students. He viewed all situations from the lens of a parent raising a child. And he has a way of cutting through all this red tape and doing what is right for children. Thank you, Joe.
Thank you, Mr. Devlin. Anyone else from the cabinet?
Yeah, I'll go next.
I'll go.
Mr. McGee. This is Don Irwin. And I just want to take a moment, Joe, to thank you for taking me under your wing during this first year while I was in Neshaminy. Your patience and your understanding and you continue to make sure that I knew where every landmine was planted, and you steered me away from most of them. And your patience and your sense of humor, I thank you so much and wish you all the luck in the world. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Irwin?
I'll go next. Joe had the belief to find the good in everyone, no matter the situation, no matter who the person was. He was always looking for the good. And I know he talked about celebrating what's right. From day one of his appointment, he did start every meeting with celebrating and finding what is right within the district and within the people within this district. That will resonate with me for my time as an administrator moving forward, that, we need to find, and we don't have to search too far because there are good quality things going on at Neshaminy and we have great workers here. So I will always appreciate that part of Joe. Joe, thank you for being a mentor to me. I did not have a cabinet position coming into here, and you took me under your wings. We developed a friendship, and I wish you the best of luck in that next chapter of your book. Thank you, Joe.
Mr. Jones, I want to thank you for your leadership the past few years. Your organization, professionalism, and kindness has truly created an environment that has been enjoyable to work in. Every decision you have made and continue to make is student-centered, which not only shows your genuine care for the safety and well-being, it also guided us to make the same type of decisions. Therefore, it was so without surprise when you announced your decision to return to the classroom. You truly are moving with passion in the next direction of your professional career. I wish you the best, and I truly know that your new students are lucky to have you, not only as their teacher, but as a mentor and a friend. Thank you.
Joe, we're going to miss you so much, but I just wanted to, I hope I don't cry. I think you're a great leader. I have felt like really challenged this year, but also very encouraged by you. And I've always felt like you're very open to new ideas, and any ideas that I brought forward, I felt you valued and respected. And we're going to miss you so much. So thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Mr. Jones, just to echo what everybody said, I think the accomplishments are more than the tangible ones. It's the people you're leaving behind and the effects you've left on them. One of the tangible ones that nobody seemed to mention is over your 4 years to manage to balance our budget. So you snuck that through, balanced the budget, aren't using the fund balance, albeit for one small pandemic this spring. But I think that's an amazing accomplishment. And for me, just echoing the same thoughts, you have been about helping others, helping other people that you didn't know. Helping people that, myself included, that sometimes didn't have the best interests of certain people in mind or certain things in mind. So you come to work without an ego. I've tried to get you angry. I've been unable to. It is a great accomplishment that you can maintain that being throughout. So it is my pleasure to have worked with you. I will keep that piece with me as we continue to build Neshaminy. And I can say that you've been a mentor to me up until just moments before this meeting, where we still talk and you give me your insight on things. And I know you were just a phone call away or a short drive if we have questions. So thank you. Best of luck. And you've left Neshaminy a better place than when you arrived. So thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, and I apologize. There is a We Build Future pin. I'm hoping you have one in your pocket. Any chance you have one in your pocket? Because we could not come up with one.
I've got one in my car, though. I'm okay. Thank
Okay,
you.
all right. So, so when the meeting's over, will you award yourself a We Build Future?
Thank you, Dr. McGee.
Thank you, everyone.
Right here.
There you go. John's got one. Thank you, Dr. McGee, and all the cabinet for your very poignant words about Mr. Jones. I want to continue to recognize and acknowledge the accomplishments of our departing superintendent, Mr. Jones. Joe came to us in the summer of 2016 when Neshaminy was in the midst of not only a major structural renovation, but an educational one as well. It is an enormous challenge for anyone new to take the helm of any operation at any time. But imagine willingly taking on a school system that was in as much flux as we were back then. We were in the final stages of our roadmap consolidation plan, still navigating our way through past labor issues, opening a brand new elementary school, shifting our grade level programming. We redistricted a large part of the area. We introduced full day kindergarten and a new technology program, as well as realigning most of our curriculum. That is the world Joe Jones walked into. And by all accounts, Joe just didn't keep the ship afloat. He re-engineered how it operated and worked tirelessly to avoid the choppy waters by ushering us to move smoothly into the future we have all envisioned. Joe managed our expectations, not just to reap the rewards of a major financial reinvestment, but to produce the productive educational and social outcomes. Joe managed our expectations, not just to reap the rewards of the major financial reinvestment, but produced the productive educational and social outcomes that were central to that effort. That is the enormity of the challenge Joe accepted when he came here to Neshaminy, and we were all better off for it. During his short tenure here, Joe produced some significant accomplishments. Let me list just a few. Expansion of the pre-K counts program from 36 seats to the current 150 seat program with a $1.3 million grant. Implementation of the budget assumption process. Conservative effort in his first 3 years to bring back specialized IU programs. Adoption of the board docs program for board meetings and board policy. Increasing opportunities for all students through establishing the Neshaminy Virtual Academy. Expansion of the Bucks Learning Experience program for our high school students. Advancement via individual determination, AVID, a program that provides students with tools and strategies for academic and social success in our school buildings. These are just some of the highlights of what has been a very impressive tenure here at Neshaminy. Joe's dedication to our district in just the 4 years he has manned the helm has provided guidance and direction that will benefit Neshaminy students and the community for years to come. It is with much sadness we have to say goodbye and pass the torch to a new leader, but Joseph Jones III's stewardship will be long referred to as some of the most positive and productive times here at Neshaminy. While I may have to say goodbye to a district leader, I do not have to say goodbye to a new friend. Joe, I, as well as the entire board, wish you luck and success wherever this next chapter in life's journey takes you. You, my friend, are one of the most decent, dedicated, and humble persons I have ever had the pleasure to work with. On behalf of the entire Neshaminy community, I'd like to present you with a small token of appreciation. Please display this with pride it deserves for all you have accomplished here. And I don't know if you all can see this. I'll try and hold it up. It says, from the Neshaminy School District, presented to Joseph Jones III, with deep appreciation for your dedication and service to the entire Neshaminy community as Superintendent of Schools 2016 through 2020. We build futures by empowering each child to become a productive citizen and a lifelong learner. It's embroidered with our Neshaminy symbol, as well as our cultural and heritage masthead, as a remembrance of the rock that Neshaminy is. I can tell you that Mr. Stanley and your secretary, Donna, insisted that we present you with something to carry the weight of what you have done here. And this thing weighs about 3 pounds. So I want you to display it in a place of prominence. And I promise that we will get this shipped to you very soon. So thank you very much, Mr. Jones, for all you've done here at Neshaminy.
Thank you for the kind words. I really appreciate all of that from the cabinet, from you. And it's been my pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you. At this time, board, I would like to hold comments until board comment, if that's okay with everybody, and we'll move back to the agenda. Thank you very much. We're going to move to routine matters. I will like to make a master motion for 4.01 minutes, 4.02 treasurer's report, 4.03 check register and procurement card purchases, 4.04 budget transfers, 4.05 investments. The motion's been made. Can I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mrs. Bowman. Any comments, questions, or concerns? Hearing none, roll call vote, Mrs. Burns?
Mr. Allen,
Yes.
Mrs. Bowman,
Yes.
Mrs. Boyle,
Yes.
Mrs. Hallenbeck,
Yes.
Mr. Marrington. Mr. Marrington. Mr. Marrington,
Yes.
Mr. Parentano.
Yes. Could you please call Mr. Kovitz? He's online now.
Yes, Mr. Kovitz,
Yes.
Mr. Cirillo,
Yes.
Mr. Sullivan,
Yes.
9-0.
Thank you. Motion passes 9-0. That moves us to section 5, personnel. 5.01, approval of Act 93 agreements. Resolved that the Neshaminy School Board of Directors approves the 2020 to 2025 agreements with 1, the Neshaminy School District Administrators Association, 2, the Neshaminy Administrative Support Association, And 3, the Neshaminy Cabinet Administrators Association. Motion's been made. May I have a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Sullivan. In a race to the finish. Mrs. Burns, and we have a roll call, but I'm sorry. Any comments, questions, or concerns? Hearing none, I just want to thank all the representatives of our 3 administrators groups for working with the board, recognizing the challenges that are upon us, and agreeing to secure the long-term leadership of this district with these 5-year agreements. I appreciate all that have worked so hard to bring these to a closure. So hearing that, Mrs. Burns, roll call vote, please.
Mr. Allen,
Yes.
Mrs. Bowman,
Yes.
Ms. Boyle,
Yes.
Mrs. Hallenbeck,
Yes.
Mr. Kovitz,
Yes.
Mr. Marrington,
Yes.
Mr. Parentano,
Yes.
Mr. Cirillo,
Yes.
Mr. Sullivan,
Yes.
9-0.
Motion passes 9-0. Thank you. Section 6, Mr. Sullivan, please.
Yes. I'd like to make a master motion to approve item 6.01, leaves of absence, 6.02, revised leaves of absence, 6.03, revised returns from leave, 6.04, appointments, 6.05, summer work assignments, and 6.06, summer program appointments.
Thank you, Mr. Sullivan. Motion's been made. May I have a second?
Second.
Second by Mrs. Bowman. Any comments, questions, or concerns? Hearing none, roll call vote, Mrs. Burns?
Mr. Allen,
Yes.
Mrs. Bowman,
Yes.
Ms. Boyle,
Yes.
Mrs. Hallenbeck,
Yes.
Mr. Kovitz,
Yes.
Mr. Marrington,
Yes.
Mr. Parentano,
Yes.
Mr. Cirillo,
Yes.
Mr. Sullivan,
Yes.
9-0.
Motion passes 9-0. Thank you. That brings us to section 7. Mrs. Hollenbach, please.
I'd like to make a master motion to approve 7.01 retirements, resignations, end of assignments, 7.02 leaves of absence, 7.03 appointments, 7.04 summer work appointments, and 7.05 summer program appointments.
Okay.
Motion's been made. May I have a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Kovitz. Any comments, questions, or concerns?
I'd like to make a comment.
Yes, go right ahead, please, Ms.
I'd like to recognize Jeannie Drake for putting in 30 years as a health aide at Tawanka, and I think she's been in other buildings throughout the district. So congratulations on your retirement, and I hope you enjoy it.
Very well deserved. Thank you. Any additional comments or concerns? Hearing none. Mrs. Burns, roll call vote?
Mr. Allen,
Yes.
Mrs. Bowman,
Yes.
Ms. Boyle,
Yes.
Mrs. Hallenbeck, Mrs. Hallenbeck,
Yes.
Mr. Kovitz,
Yes.
Mr. Marrington,
Yes.
Mr. Parentano,
Yes.
Mr. Cirillo,
Yes.
and Mr. Sullivan,
Yes.
9-0.
Motion passes 9-0. Thank you. That brings us to section 8. Mrs. Boyle, would you please read them?
I'd like to make a motion to support 8.01, which is Educational Program Settlement Agreement. And 8.02, which is the Sports Extracurricular Health and Safety Plan.
Thank you. There's a motion, master motion's been placed on the table. Maybe have a second, please.
Second.
Second by Mr. Sullivan. Any comments, questions, or concerns?
I thought we were going to read 8.02 separately, just to clarify what our safety plan is for sports.
You're
Okay.
You're
All
correct, Mrs. Bowman. Would you do that, Mrs. Boyle, please?
Okay. Whereas the Neshaminy School District's athletic and extracurricular programs operating under the guidelines of the Pennsylvania Interscholastic Athletic Association are permitted to resume training activities in the designated COVID-19 yellow and green phases in alignment with the PDE regulations and guidelines. And whereas in response to the COVID-19 pandemic and the recommendation of the state and the PIAA, the Neshaminy Board of School Directors is implementing a health and safety plan for the return of athletic and extracurricular activities in accordance to the designated state sport and activities pandemic guidelines. Now therefore be it resolved that the Neshaminy Board of School Directors hereby approves the attached health and safety plan for sports and extracurricular activities in order to permit students, coaches, and directors the opportunity to begin training and conditioning activities effective July 1, 2020.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Boyle. Motion's been made. May I have a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Cirillo. Any comments, questions, or concerns? Okay, hearing none. Roll call vote, Mrs. Burns?
Mr. Allen,
Yes.
Mrs. Bowman,
Yes.
Miss Boyle,
Oh, yes.
Mrs. Hallenbeck,
yes,
Mr. Kovitz,
Yes.
Mr. Marrington,
Yes.
Mr. Parentano,
Yes.
Mr. Cirillo,
Yes.
Mr. Sullivan,
Yes.
9-0.
Motion passes 9-0. Thank you. That brings us to section 9. Mrs. Hollenbeck, please.
I'd like to make a master motion for 9.01 contracted transportation services for 2020-2021. Aramark contract for 2020 through 2021, and 9.03 stop loss insurance for 2020 through 2021.
Thank you, Mrs. Hollenbeck. Master motion's been made. May I have a second?
Second.
Second by Mrs. Bowman. Any comments, questions, or concerns on these items? Hearing none. Roll call vote, Mrs. Burns?
Mr. Allen,
Yes.
Mrs. Bowman,
Yes.
Miss Boyle,
Oh, yes.
Mrs. Hallenbeck,
Yes,
Mr. Kovitz,
Yes.
Mr. Marrington,
Yes.
Mr. Parentano,
Yes.
Mr. Cirillo,
Yes.
and Mr. Sullivan.
Yes.
That's 9-0.
Thank you. Mr. Allen, would you please read 9.04?
Yes, Mr. President. 9.04, fund balance commitment for PESers. Whereas the Pennsylvania School Employee Retirement System, PESers, is a mandatory multi-employer pension plan for all Pennsylvania school employees. And whereas PESers is funded by 3 sources: employee contributions, employer contributions, and investment earnings. And whereas in the past, investment earnings have been the primary source of funding for PESers benefits, dwarfing the contributions from both school employers and PESers active members. And whereas because of declining investment income, lower employer funding rates, and increased benefits as required by Act 2001-9 and Act 2002-38, unfunded liabilities have been created. And whereas such unfunded liabilities are creating significant employer rate hikes, now, therefore, be it resolved that the Board of School Directors may commit a portion of the remaining unassigned fund balance as of June 30th, 2020, up to $3 million towards funding this ongoing obligation, restricting these funds so that they will not be available for any other purpose unless changed by a new commitment.
Thank you, Mr. Allen. Motion's been made. May I have a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Sullivan. Any comments, questions, or concerns? At this time, I'd like to ask our business manager, Mr. Irwin, just, to keep the public up to date, could you please explain how we fund Peasers here at the district level?
Peasers is funded based on the salary. So we have approximately $82 million in our budget on salaries, and we're now paying over 1/3 of that $82 million towards the retirement system each and every year. And the Pennsylvania reimburses us only half of that. So it's up to the local taxpayers to pay upwards of 18%, 17, 18% on that $82 million towards the retirement system each and every year.
And do you have the aggregate that was budgeted for this year? Wasn't it like 28 million?
I believe it was $28 million. That's correct.
$28 million. And it's going up again next year.
Yes. And based, we had very high hopes based on the economy, but now with the pandemic, we're getting word that the rate increase might be more than projected for next year.
Okay. That's great news. Well, thank you so much.
All right. That was good news.
Motion's been made. It's been seconded. Is there any other comments and questions? Hearing none. Mrs. Burns, roll call, please.
Mr. Allen,
Yes.
Mrs. Bowman,
Yes.
Miss Boyle,
Yes.
Mrs. Hallenbeck,
Yes.
Mr. Kovitz,
Yes.
Mr. Marrington,
Yes.
Mr. Parentano,
Yes.
Mr. Cirillo,
Yes.
Mr. Sullivan,
Yes.
9-0.
Motion passes 9-0. Mr. Allen, 9.05, please.
Yes. 9.05, year-end budget transfers. Whereas Section 687 of Public School Code of 1949 requires that line item sums appropriated to specific purposes in the budget not to be exceeded, and whereas under the school accounting system, line items have been determined to be major object levels within specific subfunctions, and whereas year-end adjustments by the business office and auditors may cause such line items to be exceeded, now, therefore, be it resolved that the Neshaminy Board of School Directors, in accordance with directions from the Auditor General's Office, authorizes the business administrator to make those necessary budget transfers within and between accounts to prevent any possible over expenditure without exceeding the total budget of 2019 through 2020.
Thank you, Mr. Allen. Motion's been made. May I have a second?
Second.
A second by Mrs. Boyle. Any comments, questions, or concerns on that item? Hearing none, a roll call vote, Mrs. Burns?
Mr. Allen,
Yes.
Mrs. Bowman,
Yes.
Miss Boyle,
Yes.
Mrs. Hallenbeck,
Yes.
Mr. Kovitz,
Yes.
Mr. Marrington,
Yes.
Mr. Parentano,
Yes.
Mr. Cirillo,
Yes.
and Mr. Sullivan,
Yes.
9-0.
Motion passes 9-0. Mr. Marrington, would you please read 9.06, please?
Certainly. Okay, whereas each year the Neshaminy Board of School Directors, in accordance with instructions from the Auditor General's Office, must adjust its receipts and expenditures budget to match the total amount of monies received for other programs. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the total 2019-2020 adjusted budget, including the attached changes, now totals $187,166,227. And be it further resolved that appropriate revenue and expense adjustments should be made by the business administrator to account for the increases or decreases identified in the district fund numbers outlined in the attached document.
Thank you, Mr. Marrington. A motion's been made. May I have a second?
Second.
Second by Mrs. Hollenbeck. Any comments, questions, or concerns on this item? Hearing none, roll call vote, Mrs. Burns.
Mr. Allen,
Yes.
Mrs. Bowman,
Yes.
Ms. Boyle,
Yes.
Mrs. Hallenbeck,
yes,
Mr. Kovitz,
Yes.
Mr. Marrington,
Yes.
Mr. Parentano,
Yes.
Mr. Cirillo,
Yes.
Mr. Sullivan,
Yes.
9-0.
9-0. Motion passes 9-0. Thank you. This brings us to 9.07. Mrs. Hollenbach, would you please read that?
whereas the Neshaminy Board of School Directors has reviewed and adopted proposed final budget on May 12th, 2020, all in accordance with Act 1 of 2006 and the Public School Code of 1949 as amended. And whereas notice of intent to adopt the budget has been duly advertised as required by law, and the budget was also made public throughout the process of PDE Form 2028 as required by law. And whereas in accordance with Pennsylvania School Code, the Board of School Directors must adopt a final operating budget for the 2020-2021 fiscal year. Now therefore be it resolved that the Neshaminy Board of School Directors adopts a final operating budget of all funds as detailed below. General fund, including federal and other programs, in the amount of $183,616,556. Carry over purchase orders of, is that a 5?
393.
393,376. Be it further resolved that in order to fund the above, the following taxes are hereby levied. Real estate tax, 165.6 mils. Interim real estate taxes, 165.6. Per capita school code, $5. Per capita tax act 511, $10. Local service tax, formerly OPT-EMS, $10. Business privilege tax, 1 mil wholesale, 1.5 mils retail, $5 license fee. Mercantile tax, 1 mil wholesale, 1.5 mils retail, $2 licensing fee. Real estate transfer tax, 1%. Amusement tax, 10% as amended by law.
Thank you, Mrs. Hollenbach. Motion's been made. May I have a second, please?
Second.
Second by Mr. Kovitz. This time, I'm going to ask for some details from our business manager addressing our budget proposed. Mr. Irwin, could you add some commentary, please?
Yes, this budget reflects what we need for the continued educational programs that we have in our community. Some of which were, we celebrated it. Mr. Jones left, but it does take a commitment from the community to fund these programs, and we have now agreements with all of our labor agreements, the teachers that have been previously approved this year, as well as the support staff, and now the administrators here this evening. So all those raises are now included in this program, and we've cut back significantly back to the 2018-19 non-personal services budget, where we had a very successful year and were able to save a lot of money. And that was our moving forward. That was what we budgeted this year in the 2021 budget, because we knew we were able to do that successfully in the 2018-19 school year. And this does require this. The budget before you includes a 2.5 mil tax increase, approximately 1.5%. Above the 163.1 mils last year, well below the Act 1 limit. And in previous conversations that we had leading up through the budget process, I counseled the board and the committees at that time that it was really necessary to include that tax increase as you look forward, not only for the 2021 school year, but the 21-22 school year and the out years, because the budget deficit would grow significantly if we weren't able to sustain this tax revenue. We are including with this budget a use of the fund balance of approximately $1.3 million. And we will look to save that $1.3 million as we move through the year. but I think this has been a good collaborative effort from the all levels of the organization, the support staff, the principals, the teachers, understanding what they, get what they need, not necessarily what they want, as well as the administration, the cabinet, and now the school board. So I want to thank everybody that has participated.
Thank you, Mr. Irwin. Before I move to the board, I want to give Dr. McGee a chance to comment because, this will be his budget in about 7 days.
Thank you,
Dr. McGee.
Mr. Parentano. So I think we have a solid position here that is a compromise between what's going on in the world and what the district needs. To echo Mr. Irwin's comments, the uncertainty of the future causes us to plan for multiple scenarios, including what we're budgeted for, which is entirely in school, like we all know it, the potential for entirely out of school if someone tells us we can't come in, and then the whole idea of some partial plan, and then the option of giving parents the choice whether they're comfortable sending their children back to school regardless of the plan. And the portability between all of those plans as things change. So the idea is we're actually going to end up be doing more and probably spending significantly more money to make that happen, to deliver to the community what they expect us to deliver. And that's the ability to adjust as the world adjusts. So I think this puts us in a good spot. Still some uncertainty depending on what September looks like and what people choose as far as their path of education. Some of them are more expensive than others. Some of them are budgeted for, some of them are not. So just a word of caution that next year, giving the community what they expect from Neshaminy in form of options, so they can get educated and feel safe at the same time, could very well end up costing us more than actually what is budgeted.
Thank you, Dr. McGee. At this time, I'll ask the board, is there any comments, concerns, or questions on this item number?
I have a question for Mr. Irwin.
Go right ahead, Tina.
Mr. Irwin, how much money is approximately in the fund balance right now?
$42 million.
And how much are we putting back from this year's budget that we didn't need?
We're estimated that to be, pardon me?
Approximately, I understand it's not fun.
Yeah, somewhere between $3 and $5 million.
All right, so say it's 4 and we have 42, so we have 46, we'll have $46 million in the fund balance, is that correct?
Yes.
Thank you.
Any other comments, questions, or concerns from the board members?
Mr. Irwin, of that 46, how much is committed for Peasers?
Approximately $15 million.
Thank you.
And Don, I'd like to ask a question. We haven't really had this discussion yet since you've taken over. We have a board policy which directs us a general fund balance. And if I remember correctly, I believe it's between 6 and 8% of the budget. What is your number for the number that you feel comfortable in the general fund balance in order to maintain our responsibilities like our swap fund for Peasers that we pay every 2 weeks, but we only get subsidied 3 or 4 times a year?
Yeah, that's clearly why you need to have somewhere between 6 and 8% of the fund balance, undesignated and available for use as the year goes on because of the cash flow that is required by the organization. But in addition to some of the questions that weren't asked, if you begin to look about what the future holds with our facilities, while we will want to have borrowing for some of the capital expenditures that are related to additional facilities and upgraded facilities, you also want to be able to use some of this fund balance as a down payment on that, so you're not borrowing the entire amount as you move forward. For instance, the amount Pearl Buck, the amount that was associated with just renovating that would have been $15 million. And so, if you're able to have, and we've decided not to do that, but if you were going to do that, you wouldn't want to necessarily borrow that $15 million. You would potentially want to use some or a lot of the fund balance to offset those borrowing costs that you so you didn't have to continually increase the millage rate to pay back those bonds.
All right, so based upon 16%, so you're telling me that you want to maintain around 15 million, 16 million just as a general fund
Yes.
is what you feel comfortable with?
Yeah, I would say between 12 and 15 million, yes.
Right. All right, and then we postponed a total of $9 million worth of projects to 2023, 24.
That's correct.
They're the maintenance projects.
That's
and
correct.
That doesn't include Pearl Buck.
That's correct.
Right.
We continue to defer significant capital projects that are not necessarily creating new facilities, but just upkeeping our existing facilities into the future because of the tightness of these budgets are under. You know, this budget that you're passing tonight is very, very tight.
All right. And do you have any guidance on what neighboring districts have done?
As it relates to
their budgets and the Act 1 index?
It runs the whole gamut right now. I've seen districts, Council Rock went to the max, and I think even beyond. I know some are holding tight because of the pandemic, without raising any taxes this year. It really, because of the uncertainty of the pandemic that is put upon us, you'll see everything if you go across Bucks County.
All right, thank you. Is there any other board members have any comments or concerns or questions they would like to add?
I just wanted to comment that, you know, when we began the budget process, we were in a certain situation with some expectations of what our local economy was going to look like. And then the sand shifted out from under us. That changed the whole equation on us, which led to a lot of soul searching. It led to a lot of things being cut from our budget. Things that I personally had difficulty with because I've maintained, you know, coming from my background, that one of the first things budgets get, you know, maintenance budget gets cut, facility budget gets cut, and that's short-sighted. But I had to tolerate some of that because, as I said, you know, the sand shifted out from under us. I said, I believe we went back and forth on a lot of it, and I believe this represents a fair compromise. And while again,
I can't tell if you're muted or not. Can you?
Can we mute everybody, please?
You know, recognizing that things have changed, people's income has changed, but our business income throughout the area has changed. We you know, there are a lot of unknowns. We don't know how much that economy will recover and contribute. And all of that with the fact that we've had, you know, we've made investments, we've made commitments to facilities. We have bond issues that will still need to be paid back. And, you know, we have labor commitments that were won hard, and we have to satisfy those commitments. So I just wanted to remind everyone of that. And we all sat at these meetings and made those commitments and made those decisions. And we also discussed coming to a compromise. So I want everyone to keep that in mind when we come to this final vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Allen.
Mr. Allen, I have one more question.
Go right ahead, Mrs. Hollenbeck.
Mr. Allen just brought up about the bonds that we have to pay back. How much money did we just save on the bonds that we repositioned?
The refinancing of those bonds,
Yes.
they'll settle on June 30th. If Mr. Irwin can correct me if I'm wrong, but over the life of that bond, is it 27 years remaining on the life of that bond?
18 years, I believe.
18 years. We'll save probably $10 million, hopefully, when it settles over that 18 years. I believe the first 7 years are $750,000 a year. Is that correct?
I'm not sure about that, Mr. Periton, but what was done is, what we did was we worked very hard to eliminate the bump that was going to happen in the 27-28 school year, where there was going to be an additional $650,000 per year after that time to as it relates to a previous financing. So our number one goal was to try to keep these bond payments steady for the next 18 years, instead of having a bump 4 or 5 years from now that we would have to overcome without getting anything for that, any additional facilities at that time. So that $10 million that is being discussed, that's future savings out in future budget years.
Right. Mr. Tarente, do you have the exact figures? I know we discussed them, but I believe the first 7 years or less, and then it grows after the first 7 years.
Yes, everyone say hello to my daughter, Luzette. But
how you doing, honey?
The first, I believe it's 8 years, is between $250,000 and $350,000, and then after that, the last 10 years is about $700,000.
Okay, so it's 3 something in the first years, then it shifts to 7. All right, thank you, Mr. Tarente. Any other questions?
I had a question. I know we're trying to. We have the immediate hurdle of passing this tonight, but we also have to look down the road, and next year is going to be a challenge as well, from what I understand, and we're going to have an even larger gap. Could someone on the operations committee explain to me what that hurdle is, and if someone could please explain what that hurdle is, that would be very helpful at the moment.
Without this tax increase here this evening, that hurdle, you'd be faced with a $4 million budget gap as you begin the budget process next year. With this increase, that amount is reduced to approximately $2 million.
But this isn't. We're not taking the full Title I here, correct? Not the full Title I increase.
The Act 1. That's correct.
Excuse me, Act 1. So we're not taking the full one. So I know Mr. Allen brought up a concern that I've had, that we might be deferring major projects off, another 2 or 3 years, kicking down the road. How many of these projects would we be able to complete, if we were able to do the full Act 1 now? And I understand this is really tricky, but if we were to do the full Act 1 now, we would have less of a budget gap next year. How much of a budget gap would we have, Mr. Irwin? Do you have the numbers on that?
If you went to the full Act 1, you would have less than $1 million budget gap next year.
Less than $1 million. So, but it would also give us the ability to do a lot more, would it not?
Yes. And when I throw those numbers out, you have to remember that we have budgeted with a lot of assumptions, curtailing the local mercantile taxes and such on the local side because of the pandemics restrictions, if you will, on our local economy. So if that's assuming then that most of those local revenue.
We lost Don. You there now?
We lost.
I was getting a phone call. I'm sorry. I'm saying that we are then assuming with those numbers that the local economy then is coming back in its 1920 pre-pandemic form.
Sure. I mean,
isn't everything an assumption though, and we don't know because everything keeps shifting from minute to minute, day to day, basically?
Yeah,
yes.
None of us has the crystal ball. I get it. I'm just looking, and I believe, Mr. Irwin, you said this, maybe it was last meeting, maybe it was the meeting before, but we only have one shot at being able to get this money. I get it. The last thing I want to do is raise taxes on anyone, because I'm raising taxes on myself, and I live in the district too. But I mean, if it's, to me, this is pay now or pay later. I understand this is a sticky subject, but I mean, if we keep deferring, capital projects, I know that maintenance becomes a huge issue if we're deferring these things. That's just my concern. Anyway, that's where I stand. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kovitz. Does any other board member want to add commentary?
Yeah, Mr. Irwin, I think you had mentioned we're looking at a 25 mil increase in this budget. Is that correct?
No, 2.5 mil increase.
Oh, 2.5 mil increase. Okay. And what would that work out to be for the average household?
Approximately $17.
$17 for the year?
Yes.
Okay. Wow.
It's a 1.5% increase.
Right. Okay. So $17 a year, and for that, we're able to not cut any programs, minimize our maintenance cuts. Although, as Adam has pointed out, there's some maintenance I also believe we should be, proceeding with. Okay, that's all the question.
Yes. And those maintenance cuts came as part of a compromise, if you will,
Right.
as we put that proposed budget together.
Sure.
Don, when I calculated that increase, I came up with $69 for the average household for the year. Wasn't it 17 a month for the
I'm
full
sorry.
increase?
That's right. That's right. The amount that I said was per month.
Right. That was for the 17 a month. I think was the full increase.
Yeah, based on my last presentation, it would have been
Right.
$69 per year. You're absolutely right.
For the average
Thank
house.
you for that correction.
Yeah. Okay. So
Right.
that comes out to be about $1.30 a week.
Right.
For to save programs and.
Right.
Okay.
Does anyone else have any commentary?
I have a quick question. Can you explain to me the amusement tax? It says 10%. Is that a 10% increase?
No, that's 10% total.
10% total?
Based on the agreement between the district and Sesame Street.
Sesame Place. And
But they're capped, though.
right, Sesame
10%,
Place.
but they're capped.
Okay, but
That
they're
is-
not even operating right now.
Right.
And can you explain to me the mercantile tax? What is that increase? 1 mil wholesale?
That's not an increase. That's a flat. That's exactly what it was last year. The only increase is to the real estate tax. The rest of those are as they were the previous year and have been for many years.
Okay, so the only big change in that is the real estate transfer. Okay,
The real estate and interim real estate taxes.
okay.
Mr. Tarente, Sesame Place, aren't they capped at $500,000 a year for us?
Well, no, it's the percentage that's capped. It's the 10%. It
That's
can't be
10%.
adjusted, can't go up.
Right.
So
Oh, it's
that's
the
where-
percentage that's
Yeah.
capped. Okay. All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any last comments from any board members?
Yeah, I have a quick comment. I just want a clarification. So even with this tax increase, we're still going to be in a hole next year.
That's correct.
Okay.
Anyone else? All right, hearing none, I just want to make one last statement just to say that I support this budget. It was a compromise budget. I understand everybody's point of view on this budget. We've made commitments. We've made commitments to our employees. We made commitments to the IU. We made commitments to the tech school. And we have no idea of what COVID's going to bring to our expenses next year, let alone whether or not the revenue loss projections are true or not. 100% agree with Mrs. Hollenbach. They're all assumptions. We don't know, but we're responsible to deliver the education that we promised to this district and the education our community members expect. So I would hope that the board members could support this budget. And with that, I will ask Mrs. Burns to call a roll call. Mrs. Burns, this will be an executive roll call vote.
Okay, Mrs. Bowman,
No.
Miss Boyle,
No.
Mrs. Hallenbeck,
No.
Mr. Kovitz,
Yes.
Mr. Marrington,
Yes.
Mr. Cirillo,
No.
Mr. Sullivan,
Yes.
Mr. Allen,
Yes.
Mr. Parentano.
Yes.
5 yes and 4 no.
Budget passes, 5 yes, 4 no. That brings us to 9.08. Mrs. Hollenbeck, would you please read that?
Get it up.
Did we lose Mrs. Hollenbeck?
No, I need it to be up on the screen. It's still.
Oh, no problem.
Be it resolved that the Neshaminy Board of School Directors hereby approves the attached homestead and farmstead exclusion resolution that authorizes a real estate tax assessment reduction for the school year beginning July 1, 2020, under the provisions of the Homestead Property Exclusion Program Act, part of Act 50 of 1998, and the Taxpayer Act, Act 1 of 2006.
Thank you, Mrs. Hollenbeck. Motion's been made. May I have a second, please?
Second.
Second by Mr. Kovitz. Just because of the previous conversation, I'd just like to ask Mr. Irwin if he could just give a quick informational to the public on what pays for the Homestead Act.
This is money that it comes from the gambling revenue to the homeowners of the community. So those who have approved homesteads, we don't have any farmsteads in Neshaminy, but if we had any, it would be homesteads and farmsteads, that they get an equal share of the $3.6 million of the gambling funds that comes from the gambling pool out of the state of Pennsylvania to our community, to be split evenly over the 16,000 some homesteads that are in the district, for a total reduction of 200, and I believe it's 200. I'm trying to find it. $214.45.
So if that money would disappear, then an individual's property taxes would increase by that much.
That's correct.
Taxes. And what has been our guidance on casino money?
Well, the guidance has been all over the place. I mean, initially the state certified that they had the money, then they came out and said that they really only had half the money. So they used some of the federal stimulus money to make up for this, to allow the full homestead farmstead exemption to go through to the school districts this year. But next year, we really don't know how this is going to play out.
So we don't have guidance for next year. All right, thank you very much. Any comments, questions, or concerns on this item? Hearing none, Mrs. Burns, roll call vote, please.
Mr. Allen,
Yes.
Mrs. Bowen,
Yes.
Ms. Boyle,
Yes.
Mrs. Hallenbeck,
Yes.
Mr. Kovitz,
Yes.
Mr. Marrington,
Yes.
Mr. Parentano,
Yes.
Mr. Cirillo,
Yes.
and Mr. Sullivan.
Yes.
9-0.
Motion passes 9-0. Thank you very much. This brings us to other board business. Does any board member have any other board business they'd like to bring forward?
Yeah, I would just like to bring up something that Mr. Jones had mentioned during his comments. Neshaminy did lose another long-term teacher, coach, administrator, and Howard Lidner on Wednesday night. We lost him to COVID-19. I've known Howard for a long, long time. He was my track coach at Neshaminy back in the 1960s. And those of you who knew Howard knew he was a pretty extroverted, gregarious person. And I think in one of the cruel ironies of this virus, he spent the last several weeks of his life in total seclusion at St. Mary's, unable to see even his own family. But I'd just like to mention that, Howard, for me, he meant a lot to me, and I know a lot of other athletes at Neshaminy over the years. We talked very glowingly tonight about you, Mr. Meehan, about how good a job some of our police do and so forth in the school, Howard was that guy back in the 60s and 70s. He was the kind of person that kids felt they could talk to, even though he was an administrator and a coach, and did talk to him. So I just wanted to mention this. Unfortunately, again, because of COVID, you know, they can't hold any sort of celebration of life until some future date. Mr. Lidner there will be a funeral this Sunday at St. David's Cemetery, but again, the attendance is very limited. So anyway, I just wanted to make sure that the Neshaminy community was aware of Mr. Lidner's passing, and that's my main comment right now.
Thank you, Mr. Merrington. Duly noted. Howard definitely made an impression on a lot of people, that's for sure. That will bring us to our second period of public comment. Same rules apply. You have 3 minutes. Please state your name, the area you live in, your occupation. Please spell your name for the board secretary so she can take proper minutes, and please, no personal attacks. Mr. Stanley, you have the mic.
Right, yeah, we'll do this the same way. If you could use the raise the hand feature, and we'll start with Susie Drake, please.
Hi, Susie Drake, D-R-A-K-E, Pendel, Neshaminy High School teacher, alum, NFT vice president. I would like to echo my the well wishes of Tara to Mr. Jones. You have been a great leader to Neshaminy over the years, and I appreciate everything you have done for the community. To Rob, congrats. It's nice to have another Neshaminy alum leading the way in the district. I look forward to working with you. And I'd like to take a moment of personal indulgence. Thank you to Mrs. Bowman for recognizing my mother for her 30 years in Neshaminy. I was the first person in my family to go to college. My mom had left to raise 3 kids. She had been a nurse at Germantown Hospital back in the day. When I decided to go to college, she got one of the first jobs at Neshaminy as a health aide. She would go around the district and, you know, subbing in nurses' offices and secretarial offices. She became one of the very first health aides when they were all LPNs. And, you know, she has been a great asset to Neshaminy. Most of her time was spent at Heckman, her last few years at Tawanka. She battled breast cancer twice with the support of her Neshaminy family. And I'm so incredibly proud of the number of people who showed up at her drive-by retirement parade, the number of families who have reached out over the years, who have offered their well wishes. You know, you guys may not have known my mom. She's crazier than I am, but she truly embodied the Neshaminy spirit. She's not going anywhere. I'm not going anywhere. My sister's still at Hoover. So, Mr. Piratano, you can not worry about Mrs. Drake anymore. There's Ms. Drake around. But I didn't tell my mom I was doing this because I didn't want to be freaked out. So I'm going to send her the video later. But congrats. Enjoy your time in the Poconos and come back and cheer us on in the fall.
Very good. Thank you, Mrs. Drake. Miss Drake. You put that in my head.
I know.
Mr. Stanley.
Do we have anybody else who would like to speak this evening? All right, I'm going to auctioneer this, going once and going twice. And back to you, Mr. Piratano.
Thank you, Mr. Stanley. That will bring us to board comment. Mrs. Bowman.
Mr. Piratano, before you
I'm
begin-
sorry. Hold on one second. Go ahead, Mr. Trente.
It's okay. I apologize for the interruption. During public comment, Margaret had requested that this board comment regarding the Redskins name. Unfortunately, since this matter is still on appeal, my recommendation to the board is not to make comment at this time and wait until the appeal has been resolved.
Thank you. Mrs. Bowman.
What he just said, I was going to say.
Okay.
we would love to answer your question about that, but like our solicitor said, we really cannot answer that question. Congratulations, Mr. Jones. It's been great working with you. Thank you for showing me the ropes as a board member and indulging me in weird school conversation because I was always 20 to 15 minutes late for board meetings. And welcome to the School District of Philadelphia. You are going to find it extremely rewarding, and I am going to track your progress in the district, and I will be sending you a lot of emails. So thank you. Also just wanted to touch base. I voted no because I did not support a tax increase to the public. I think that we've endured enough. $79 or $69 or whatever it is, you know, that's a tank of gas for somebody to go to work. And I just think that we've been through so much as a community. I did not feel good about giving anybody any additional cost. There's people that are out of work. I think when we vote, we tend to think of ourselves and our economic situations, which is not true for every single family in Neshaminy. So I just wanted to say I did not support the tax increase, and that's why I voted no. And I just wanted to explain that to everybody what my viewpoint was. And enjoy the summer, and we will see you guys back here at the end of July.
Thank you, Mrs. Bowman. Mrs. Boyle.
Yes, I wanted to congratulate Mr. Jones. And I was thrilled when I realized that he was going to Kensington, which is my old stomping ground. I voted no about the tax increase because I think I do understand the fiscal constraints that we go through as a district, but this is not the year. And so I just wanted to explain that to everyone. And basically that's about it. Okay.
Thank you, Mrs. Boyle. Mrs. Hollenbach, please.
I'd like to wish Joe congratulations in his new role. It was certainly a pleasure working with you. I remember sitting around the round table going through your first and second interview with all of us at the time. It was truly a pleasure. Welcome again to Rob. That starts officially in 7 days. I'm sure it'll be interesting for everybody involved, but I expect great things again from Dr. McGee. I hope everybody enjoys their summer and has a great time. In regards to the budget, no, I didn't vote for it because of the tax increase. We have the fund balance for a rainy day, and if this wasn't a rainy day, then I don't know what was or is. I do not believe in cutting programs. I never have. And it is what it is. So everybody have a great summer. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Hollenbeck. Mr. Kovitz.
Yeah, I just wanted to mirror for a moment what Mr. Marrington said about Howard Lindner. He was, I didn't know him as long as many folks who grew up here did. But that said, he was a big supporter, and he will be missed. He already is missed. On to happier news. Mr. Jones, I wanted to thank you so much for the role that you played, not only in Neshaminy, but the role you actually played in my life. You may not have considered that. However, it's always interesting when teachers begin to realize from their students and those that they interact with, how much they may impact one's life. The reason I first got involved with school board was because I knew I wanted to get into education. I was dipping my feet at the time. I was doing substitute teaching at the time, and when I needed some advice as to what my next steps would be to kind of seal the deal, become a teacher, Mr. Jones provided some really good advice that I was able to take immediately to heart, put into action. And wouldn't you know, 2 years after the fact, I'm about to finish up my alternate route program at the end of this month and get my standard teaching cert. So for that, I thank you very much for the impact, not only, again, that you had on Neshaminy, but on me and my new chosen career. Thank you.
Very good, Mr. Kovitz. Thank you. Mr. Marrington, please.
I also need to congratulate Mr. Jones on his new career. And also, something that struck me from the very beginning was how much courage it took to come across the river from a small South Jersey town to a district like Neshaminy that was really in some turmoil at that time. I'm not quite sure why you made that choice, but we're all very, very happy that he did. I also, as a longtime teacher myself, I think I worked with, I don't know, 8, 9, maybe 10 superintendents in my career in the classroom. And I can't remember one of them that was consistently as positive in his messaging as Mr. Jones has been in the couple of years I've known him here at Neshaminy. And I think that positive messaging is important. He always shares the credit. I think that's also an important piece of and a good reason is a good explanation as to why Mr. Jones was able to accomplish as much as he did in a really short time here at Neshaminy. People want to do things for you. Because you're so positive and supportive, people want to help and do their best as well. And good luck going back into the classroom. I don't know of any superintendents who, there might be some out there, but I can't think of any. We decided to go back into the classroom after as long a career as you've had. So good luck, Joe, and thanks for all you did here at Neshaminy.
Thanks, Dave.
Thank you, Mr. Marrington. Mr. Cirillo.
Sure. I'd like to start off by thanking Mr. Jones. I have worked with him at the least amount of time of any school board member, but he has actually helped me along quite a bit, and he's been an extraordinary gentleman the entire time. He's a very genuine, humble individual, and I'm very happy for him in his new endeavor. So thank you for cluing me in on some of the ins and outs so far. Very appreciated. As far as me, I did vote. I was not for a tax increase. I personally know a lot of people affected by this. I think it's a rather lousy time that we're going through. And my thought was, if we were going to be in a budget hole to begin next year anyway, what was the point in raising taxes and making it even more difficult on some people who could still be possibly out of work and struggling to pay bills as it is. So that was my thought process on it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cirillo. Mr. Sullivan.
Yes. I don't think there's any time it's a good time for a tax increase, but one of the things we did discuss around the table was that increase this year compounds for all future years to come. And as Mr. Allen said, I think this was a compromise. It wasn't the full Act 1 increase that some districts went to, but it was a compromise. And I guess over the last couple of months since this pandemic started, I've seen a number of clients that had significant reserves just get evaporated once their revenue stream dried up. So I think it was the right thing to do, and that's why I voted yes for it. As for Mr. Jones, best of luck in your new endeavor. I think I heard Ms. Boyle say that she wants to come down and meet you for coffee at her old neighborhood, which should be fun, I would think. I guess a couple years ago, I guess when I was board president, we used to get those once a month morning meetings over at the Edgewood Cafe, and we would talk about the district, and they were good. They helped me learn about the inner workings of the school district, which I really didn't know that much about at that point in time. And then as time wore on, some business commitments came up, and we couldn't, for me, and we couldn't have those breakfasts. But I did look forward to them. I definitely enjoyed them, And then last year, I had to step down, and I'll apologize for that, and I'll just leave that lay. That's all I have. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Sullivan. Mr. Allen.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Peritano. I'd like to start out with addressing well, it's a small elephant in the room in regards to our graduation plans. I think many of us are aware of the debates that have gone on social media. We all, with the best of intentions, trying to put the best program together for our senior class this year, who have been, it's an extraordinary year, as everyone said, many a time. But I did want to make note of the senior class parents who were persistent and, willing to dig in and made the right contacts, shared their ideas with us, which I'm pleased to say we were able to incorporate, as much of them as we could. It's obvious we're never going to please everybody, but I want to point out I don't want to point out, I want to thank them for sticking with us, working with administration. I want to thank administration for tolerating some of the flare-ups that came. It was a pressure cooker as we all tried to come up with a plan that satisfied the most people possibly, and most importantly, give our senior class the recognition they deserved. And I just wanted to point that out. Thank everyone for that. And that brings me to Joe. Joe, I didn't have the pleasure of interviewing you or choosing you for this district. Others on the board did that for me. I just want to say you won me over immediately when our very first conversation over at Hoover, I think it was, we showed up for a plaque dedication over there based on the renovations we have accomplished. And that immediately opened up a conversation on facilities, and that won me over immediately. And then our time together on the tech board, you acting as superintendent of record, I on the program committee, and then later as president, when we worked through the articles of agreement, we worked together to come up with what we felt was a fairer funding, and also a fair rubric for accepting students over there. I just want to thank you for, I felt like I had a partner in that conversation, along with Adam and Cindy, but, it was nice to know you were in our corner as well and understood where we were coming from. Yes, you came along at a difficult time. And, there were labor issues. There were, and I said many a times, you could be adversarial, but it should never break down into an enemy situation. And I think your guidance and your stewardship of those discussions helped keep that from happening. I will miss having you around. I said I feel that I hope a friend that I'll be able to stay in contact with. It's truly been a joy working with you. I wish you well moving forward. Why in the world you'd want to go back to teaching? But I will say I know that the times I've run training courses and even going back to my scouting, I get it. There is nothing more rewarding than sharing knowledge and having somebody give it back to you. I truly do appreciate that. And I wish you all the luck in the world. And again, from the bottom of my heart, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Allen. That brings it to me to finish up. First, I want to recognize Mrs. Legier's question. There will be a time for that conversation in the future. Unfortunately, the restraints of the legal situation, we have to, just postpone that conversation. But I'm sure there'll be a time in the future where we'll be able to engage with that. Our seniors, as John had mentioned, it was a long haul to finally come up with a program that would pass the muster of our Department of Health and the governor's move to green, which allowed us to have this program on the 27th. We'll be one of the, I think, the only district in Bucks County to actually have a social engagement for our seniors during this time. While it is not going to be able to be the commencement ceremony that we had hoped to plan, and I appreciate wholeheartedly all the efforts of the community to try and contact the powers that be up in Harrisburg to try and get some common sense applied to this situation. Our administration has done a fantastic job taking everybody's concerns and molding it into a program that I'm sure the seniors are going to enjoy. They'll have an opportunity before our August 1st commencement to see their friends again, even though it'll be in controlled groups. But I think it's going to be a great program, and I hope everybody can come out once the parade route is posted, and maybe man that parade route and celebrate our seniors as they make their way from Maple Point to the high school. And I just think it's going to be a great opportunity for our kids. And it was hard fought to get there, but from April, this board made a decision collectively that we were not going to let these kids down. And I remember in that meeting when Mr. Jones told us, but all other 12 school districts want to do a no contact virtual ceremony. And we said, well, if that's what we have to do, we'll do it. But in the meantime, we're going to try and give our kids what they really deserve. And to Mr. Jones's credit, he stayed true. He fought with Bucks County and let the other superintendents from the other districts know that Neshaminy likes to do things a little bit different sometimes. And as he said, that's putting it mildly. So we can appreciate that. On the budget, I understand everybody's position on the budget. And as I told many of you, if we had some certainty moving into next school year, I could have agreed with those that voted against the proposed budget, which is the budget. But we have responsibilities. We have the responsibility to fund it. I know when you throw a number around like $42 million in a budget reserve, it sounds like a lot of money, and it is. All right. But once you move into it and you take the general reserve money out, you put away the Peasers money, then you talk about the $9 million that we deferred, the improvements that we need to do to Heckman or replace Heckman, the field improvements, not Heckman, I'm sorry, Pearl Buck. I see Mr. Sullivan squirm over there at Pearl Buck. The field improvements that are needed at the high school, we'll have that report coming up in September, October when we come in. That $42 million isn't $42 million anymore. So while other districts moved to the max, some districts took none, some districts did what we did, tried to split the difference. We positioned the Neshaminy to be in a much better condition if this COVID crisis hits and hits hard to our revenue. And not only that, what we may need to do to modify the schools to have in-person instruction like we traditionally have. I know everybody's seen the report that came from the IU. It's a very hefty number they're talking about. And that's going to end up coming from reserves if we have to do that, which will cut our reserves down even more. So this was necessary. I'm glad we were able to pass it. I wish we could have passed it in a better fashion. But a year from now, we're going to be glad that we did this. And I do feel for anyone in our community that has been severely impacted by this crisis. There's nothing more that I can say. I just feel for everybody, but we have a responsibility to make sure we maintain the best system we can for these kids and for our community. That leaves us to close out. Joe, we talked this morning. I spent a good amount of time writing that speech. I wrote it over a couple times, but at the end, what I said just sums up, how much I think of you. You are one of the most decent human beings I've ever met in my life, let alone had the pleasure of working with. those students in Kensington are going to be well served by you going into that classroom. And while nobody else said it, you're nuts, okay, for going and doing that. But God bless you for wanting to follow your passion and go back there. It's been a great experience with you here at Neshaminy. You truly left this place better than how you found it. We're on a solid path moving forward. I welcome Rob to take over and lead us even further based upon that foundation that you've created. You should rest easy at night knowing that you did one hell of a job here. And we are friends, and we will be friends forever. I really feel that, and thank you so much. And if there's anything you would like to say before we close?
I just want to thank everyone. It was very nice of all of you. I appreciated all the comments, and that's a nice way to cap my experience in Neshaminy. Thank you so much, everyone.
Well, Joe, I'd like to offer you an opportunity no other superintendent's ever been offered. Would you like to make a motion to close this hearing?
I make a motion to close the meeting.
Joe has made a motion to close the meeting. May I have a second?
Second.
Second by everyone. Meeting adjourned. Congratulations, Joe. Good luck.
Thank you.
Good luck, Joe.
Good luck. Good evening, all.
Good luck, Joe.
Have a great summer, everybody. Joe, we'll talk soon.
Congratulations, Joe.
Thank you.
Oh, good luck.
Okay.